Hi there, welcome. And in this video, we're going to be using a bit of Serum, and I'm going to show you a basic patch, and that will kind of go through some of the major components of how Serum works. So my goal of this is to show you a bit of synthesis. All right, so let's head in. I'm using Cubase today. I've got my general template, which will be another video. And now we're going to look at the basic interface. We see a couple different components around here. I'm just going to take you around a little bit. First, we see OSC, stands for oscillator. And you can see we've got two of these, oscillator A, B. Now, there are four sound sources inside Serum. There is oscillator A, B, noise, and sub. Now, all four of these are incredibly helpful when you're building sounds. And strangely enough, four oscillators or sound sources is actually surprisingly enough for a very deeply complex patch. So if we just play something, it's going to be a saw wave because that's going to be playing this particular wavetable. Now, if I were to go through the presets of the oscillators, you can see the sounds are changing. Now, if I go to this one here, basic shapes, this is going to cycle through the basic wavetables within our oscillator. So we've got a sine wave, we've got a saw wave, we've got a triangle wave, we've got a square wave, and then we've got varying pulse width square waves, basically. Now, last one is a variation in between a saw wave and sort of like a triangle wave. So you can hear it's kind of like a mix of a saw wave and a triangle wave. Anyway, so if you didn't know, most sounds just in reality or in synthesis or in just anything in general is built up of sine waves. Sine waves are the bread and butter and the foundation of just everything. Even in your own reality of sound, we hear organic sine waves all the time. A way to look at this is if you were to isolate the first part of the sound of any kind of sound. So it could be of me singing, it could be of a cello playing, it could be of a crazy saxophone. It doesn't matter. You can isolate the first little, we call this the fundamental, that happens to be a sine wave. So any kind of sound is built up of complex, crazy amounts of sine waves. I'll show you that just real quick. If I just grab any random fun sound, I'll show you this. I'll be able to give you a lot of these particular sounds. Say I grab a cello sound. Okay, let's grab a long note, okay? These are some samples I recorded with a cellist. What's this one? Yeah, say we grab this one, that's fine. I'll head back into Serum in a second, but this helps with the fundamentals of synthesis and all sorts of stuff like that. So if I were to play this, now what I'm going to do is insert a great plugin, which if you don't have, you're sleeping on it. Like, you need to get on it. It's FabFilter. So FabFilter, the whole bundle is amazing, but the EQ in particular, Pro Q3, is exceptional. Become a staple of the industry of what we use as EQs for everything. It's just great. Now, what's great about this Pro Q3 is that it's got actual analysis. It's got a spectrum on here as well. So if we take a look at the waveform, we look at the frequency, we can see that this is the lowest area, right? This bit here. So what happens if I take everything out except for this one area? Let's have a look. Now it's telling us that this is approximately a C3 out of tune by 42 cents. So C3, now if I were to go to Serum and play C3, or I guess down here, can you hear that it is literally the same, there's just less intensity. And then if I start to reveal the next harmonic, which is this one, happens to be a little bit out of tune, which is why organic sine waves are incredible. All right, so we've got these two, which is C2 and C3. Now we got another harmonic, that's approximately the fifth. This one here, again, it's like, it's in between those notes, and then we can hear, yeah. That's the third. Oh, that's dodgily out of tune, but that is approximately a G, which is the fifth, but several octaves up. This should be the major 7. Can you hear that? Tonic in there as well, so the C. And so as you go higher and higher, it gets closer and closer together in terms of the specific harmonics. And what's beautiful about this is that there is this deeply complex musical harmony, like a big chord in sine waves, just ricocheted throughout the entire frequency spectrum. And then that builds the color of your sound. How cool is that? It's so cool. Anyway, so with that process, you can basically recreate an organic sound with synthesis by understanding the exact harmonic structure of a sound. Pretty cool, right? So that's a little bit of theory for you. Let's just head back to Serum now. That's a sine wave though, right? That's kind of doing this. It's going. And then it's going. We're distorting like crazy because every time I add a note, it's just going to scatter and get more and more and more and more loud because we're adding more and more voicings. But that complex chord that I started to build was the foundation of that cello sound. And so a trumpet sound would be different, or a flute would be different, a guitar would be different. Yeah, so that's synthesis, and that's the construction of a instrument through sine waves. So now that we understand that, it helps us if we want to emulate real sounds, right? Pretty cool. So, sine wave. Great, back to Serum. Let's look at our components again. So we have oscillator A. We have oscillator B. We can select any kind of wavetables, okay? Any kind of shapes, any kind of different sounds on any of these. So that's B, then there's noise, and then there's sub, which this also has a wavetable selection. However, it's a little bit more limited because it only has sub oscillator shapes like sine waves, or a mix between a sine wave and a triangle wave, then a triangle wave, saw wave, square, and pulse. Cool, okay, so back to our oscillator A. If we want to build a basic bass sound, right? The components of what we need is a sound source. Okay, so we use an oscillator. Now, potentially we may want to use a filter. Now, what is a filter? A filter essentially allows the frequencies to be affected in some way. That's it. So if I were to play you a sound like this, say I were to change this actually to a saw wave for a second. If I were to enable a filter, and I bring back that Q3, all it's doing is this. So essentially what that is doing is it's cutting off the high frequencies and it's like rolling it down. And filters are used instead of EQs in this way because we want to have movement. We want quick, easy shapes to affect the sound. So that's why we have this filter here called a low pass filter. We also have high pass filters, which does the opposite. So it would look like this. So in the name, low pass, low can pass, high can pass, you know, or there are equivalent terms of it. low cut or high cut. So the definition is in the name. It's fairly easy. So this would be a high pass or a low cut. Right? We're cutting the lows and we're letting the highs pass. Now, same with the other way. If we go a high cut, meaning we are cutting the high frequencies and we are letting the lows pass. So you'll see these terms throughout your sequences. You'll see a LPF, which stands for low pass filter, a HPF, high pass filter, and there are several really interesting ones like band pass filter, peak filters, notch filters, then all sorts of specifically very interesting filters inside Serum, such as ring modulators, comb filters, phasers, flanges, great stuff like that. So for the purposes of a basic sound here, we are just going to use a LPF, a low pass filter, okay? Great. So we're going to switch this back to a sine wave. And we are going to enable 2 oscillators, okay? And this one, we are going to also select a basic shape, 2 of these. Now, one of these, I'm going to add an octave higher. And if I were to bring up something like this, and I were to show you just the first sine wave, then we've got the second sine wave. Great, that's looking good. That means we've got basically like a harmony, or this harmonic series of like what I was showing you in the past with the cello. But I'm going to bring down the volume of oscillator B so that oscillator A is a little bit louder, just so that the priority of the sound is in the first oscillator, right? So already we're getting a little bit more thickness, a little bit more color because we've added this extra octave over the top. Now it's pretty basic and we need to do a little bit more for this to be interesting. So why don't we also add a little bit of noise, okay? Now you might have noticed I was changing the level of these oscillators or these noise. And that's just simply the volume of your oscillator, okay? Now I'm gonna have this noise underneath both, and it will be a means of making it sound a little bit more characteristic, a little bit more texture, and that could be helpful for an interesting sound. Now within the filter, I'm going quite fast through this, so please leave comments if you have any questions about what I'm covering here. But through this filter, we showed that this is changing the frequency spectrum. Okay, so we're letting the lows pass and we're cutting off the highs by doing this. However, if I just do this, you can hear that the lowest frequency disappears whenever I do that, but the rest don't. That's because we need to enable these buttons here. This is what the filter is going to be activated from as well. So like the filter will be enabled with oscillator B and noise and oscillator A. That's what we want. But we can see at the moment it's only being affected with oscillator A. So we need to actually enable B, which is the 2 oscillators here, and N, which is your noise. S down here is sub. Now if I bring this down, we're getting the effect of the filter, which is great. Now what we might do is keep this around here. That sounded good. That's with me doing a minor semitone, which is pretty fun to do in basses. So great, we have really, really basic foundational sound here. And this has got a octave above with the second oscillator. The fundamental is strong, and we've got a little bit of noise sent through a filter. Great, early components, good. Now, if we go over to a new page, which don't be overwhelmed, it's okay. This will become your bread and butter. Effects. Now, effects is one of the big reasons we use Serum because the effects are very characteristic. It's very specific, and it has the more you use Serum, the more you can recognize the color of Serum. It was the same when we used to use the Native Instruments Massive. We all still use it sometimes, but Serum tends to have a different sound, and so we go to Serum for different purposes. So, effects. I'll take you through what all of these are real quick. So, hyper dimension. In the word itself, it means to spread, for things to sound wider, bigger, okay? So that can be helpful. Then there is distortion, which is something we're going to use today. Distortion, there are different parameters here for affecting the sound, such as different types of distortion. Drive is the amount of the distortion we are using, like how far we're pushing it. Mix is how much of the original signal or the new signal, meaning the distortion signal we have. Great, so then we have flanger. Flanger is essentially, let's just categorize all three of these as spatial effects, okay? Flanger is very metallic, phaser is very watery, chorus is very wide. We'll just have those basic definitions as a way of categorizing it. Then there is delay. Delay is like your classic echo. So echo, 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 echo. All right, cool. Compressor. The compressor is something we love inside Serum. I particularly love this. Compressor changes the dynamic range of a sound. It makes your loudest points a bit quieter and your softest points a bit louder. It just normalizes the dynamic range so that everything is a bit closer together. However, there is a mode that you will learn to really enjoy, but it's a very dangerous parameter called multiband. Multiband or over the top, OTT. Something we use a lot, especially in the electronic music industry. So this changes, so if I just play the sound on its own, and this is the disable button, this on-off button. Great, so we have compression, right? Threshold, gain, sure. Now if I add multiband, suddenly everything is compressed like crazy, okay? And so I've just messed with the threshold, the gain, and the master. And suddenly, oscillator A, B, and the noise are being smashed against each other, which creates really interesting color. Really interesting color. So, by adding the multiband function of the compressor, we are suddenly hearing it incredibly, like the noise has come out a lot more, and everything is sounding a little bit more together in a weird way. So we will use this. Then there is reverb, then there is EQ, and then there is another filter. So all of those components will be very helpful for us in creating sound. So I'm going to go back to distortion, and I'm going to bring up the drive to around 80%. I'm going to go down an octave. Suddenly, by turning these effects on, so we have that, remember we got that first harmonic, then we got the second harmonic. By adding distortion, suddenly we have all these extra harmonics. And you can see like, okay, this is, that C, then we got the C up the octave, and then we've got the G, then we've got the C up an octave, and then we got the major third, the fifth. So it just ricochets up and up. And then by adding compression, brought up everything like a lot. It's also brought up the noise, which can be good, can be bad. Now, if we go back to this first page, this filter will really help us in shaping our sound as well. So we might want to be around here. We might want it to be around here so that it's like the noise isn't destructing the sound, but it's a character of the sound. So one more thing that I like to do for this sort of stuff is to add, if it's a monophonic sound, meaning it's like a bass line where only one note should play at one time, then I make this mono. And if I want there to be somewhat a slide, like a glide or a portamento, then we can add legato. Legato means that if you bounce between notes, it will bounce, you know, like that. So then if we add some portamento, right? So this basic building blocks of this sound is very foundational and very helpful. Now, okay, that's the sound. So feel free to try all this out. You can copy the settings. I'll have the preset of this on Patreon. But also, I want to take this a step further. Anyway, so I hope that helped. Please feel free to request any kind of content next. Exciting. Yeah. So let me know if you enjoyed this one. Preset is available on my Patreon. So thank you very much, and I will see you soon. Bye.